Simon Roche, thank you for joining me in the trenches again. How are you doing, my friend?
You asked, so I'm going to answer. I'm in unbearable pain. I've been bitten by a black as opposed to a brown. A black widow spider. And
oh no.
it
What?
is on my leg. And I've got a book on animals of South Africa, and I found the culprit. This is the second time it's happened. And I've looked it up in the book. I wasn't sure that I would find it, but it's so distinct that you can't make a mistake. And the first words are, fatalities have been recorded.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's rough. But I'm
So
alive.
hold on, what have you done? How have you treated it?
Just with painkillers, and it's taken me two weeks to work this out. I've been putting hydrocortisone on it, which supposedly helps, although it doesn't seem to me to help. So I've just been taking painkillers, and I've been getting these strange, kind of reminiscent of a hangover in the middle of the day. And I couldn't figure out what it is, but the pennies finally dropped. I tried to tolerate the pain without painkillers from the time I wake up about 4 in the morning until 10 o'clock in the morning, and then only take the painkillers. And there's obviously some sort of allergic reaction, because about 45 minutes after that, I feel like death warmed up.
How did this happen? Do you know?
Yeah, they're endemic to the area, and they like to hide in dark places where they can build a nest, but, sort of under something. And it was, one of them got into a pair of jeans that I pulled on, and I felt this searing pain on my inner thigh and running back across my knee. And I knew immediately what it was, because, as I say, it's happened once before. But this time is worse, because the venom has gotten into the bones of my knee, and it's really painful. You can feel the bones touching one another, which is what they're meant to do, but you don't normally feel it, do you? Put your foot down and, you want to go through the roof.
I've just looked it up, and it says here, black widow spider bites come from female spiders, as the males pose no threat. The bite leaves 2 small dots, starting with localized pain that spreads into severe muscle cramps, abdominal agony, weakness, and tremors. Symptoms can worsen to seizures, chills, fever, nausea, and even vomiting, lasting up to 12 hours or even more. While official reports claim fatalities are rare, thanks to modern treatments, the venom's strength suggests hidden risks that might be downplayed.
Yeah, I could see how a child or a frail person or an elderly person could kick the bucket from this. It's rough. It's really, really rough.
Yeah, and here I was saying to you before we hit record that I'm feeling a bit under the weather after my trip. As I said, I'm going to be turning off my mic a few times so that I can sneeze and blow my nose and whatever else. So we're both feeling a bit rough around the edges.
Yeah, but we'll be okay.
Well, this is a good segue, because I wanted to chat to you a little bit about prepping. And this is maybe a failure in your own prepping.
Well, yes and no, but the painkillers that I'm taking are painkillers that other people don't have, and only because of my prepping. They're tremendously powerful. So, yeah, yes and no.
Which painkillers?
The one is called Napacod, and the other is called Bren something, 250 milligrams, I believe. And I've got a lot of oxytetracycline too, which I took. And then a friend of mine in the USA, a very highly trained male nurse, said to me that it's a myth that the antibiotics, the oxytetracycline, will do anything for you, because the venom is not a poison as such. It's it's like a protein compound, and antibiotics can do nothing for that. So I stopped taking the oxytetracycline, and I've also got, again, because of my preparations, activated charcoal. So I've drunk that on a few occasions to try and draw the alien proteins out of my body.
I mean, Suidlanders is basically an exit strategy organization, and one of your strengths is knowing a lot about preparing for eventualities, particularly something as dark as civil war. But I mean, leading up to that, there are all kinds of very interesting types of prepping, aren't there?
Well, I'll tell you, this morning I got an unexpected phone call from South Africa's #1 Freemason. I don't know exactly how it all fits together, and he explained this to me when I met him only by phone. Some years ago, he phoned me to talk about Suidlanders, this, that, the next thing. And he was the head of Freemasonry in South Africa, the Scottish Rite. And then he took a more senior but also more ceremonial post, as some prime ministerships and presidencies work in certain countries. Anyway, he's the #1 guy, apparently. And he rang me this morning, and we chatted for an hour and 18 minutes. And he rang me for advice. What do I think about such and such an event or incident? We haven't spoken for a few years, but it was good. He knows I'm an anti-Freemason, but we get on amicably. And in the course of the conversation, I said to him, come on, man, what's your guys' take on what's cooking in South Africa? You talk about these phases, And he said to me, no, we're not allowed to talk politics and religion. I said to him, come on, do me a favor. Anyway, eventually he said to me that they are very, very concerned. They have he is part of a big deal that's, in the offing. I suppose he's been part of many huge deals in the course of his career as top Freemason. But there's one in the offing at the moment that involves him and some buddies, their money that they raised, and another one involving a fantastical sum of money. I don't even want to mention it because it's billions, and you wonder, if it's even true. Do such amounts of money exist in South Africa? And he said to me that their deal, his and his buddies' deal, they won't put the money into South Africa. And the other deal, involving Masonic money, they are withdrawing from it completely. They're taking the money out of the country because the upper echelons of Masonry in the world have no confidence in South Africa, so they're withdrawing that particular huge amount of money. And his and his buddies' deal, they're going to put that money into a project in Namibia. So that's a bit of a long-winded way of acknowledging what you're saying about the decline of societies, or as you approach a catastrophe, and the different levels of preparation that you should undertake. What they're doing is basically putting their money in safer places. There's so much to talk about when it comes to prepping. There's a guy who lived through the Yugoslavian breakup. He's a Croat who was part of a community in Bosnia that was stranded there for a year. And they survived with very, very, very little. There was no running water, there was no electricity, there were gangs, people were knocking one another off left, right, and center, and they were being shelled by the Bosniaks. And he says that very first thing that you must do, his name is Jeko. He moved to the USA, and he's the head of shithitsthefanschool.com. And he says that the very, 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 very first thing you must do is have friends. He said it makes all the difference. You've got to have a tight-knit circle of people, because when people get desperate and they start behaving like jackals and hyenas, and they maraud and what have you, they pick on the weakest first. And he says it's a bit, well, these are actually my words, it's a bit like an animal avoiding a fight. Animals that appear to be very strong and powerful sometimes display cowardice. And what it simply is that the animal may believe that it can win the fight, but surviving in the wild with an injury is 100 times more difficult than not having an injury. And likewise, these bad actors, and you will get them in every society, go for the weakest, because even though they may overpower another group, in the process they're going to get injured. So they hone in on the zero risk targets first. And that was quite interesting to me. And he says that the second thing is a place. You must have a place that you can go to, an A, a B.
A physical place.
Yes, yes. A place of your own where you can say, this is my place. I'm entitled to be here. I'm not squatting. I'm not trespassing. I'm not vulnerable to being evicted. I'm not vulnerable to somebody else coming along and saying, I'm entitled to this spot. I saw it first. Or I was here a year ago, and now you've come, but actually I staked a claim, as it were, prior to you. And I found that very interesting, you know, as opposed to the concepts that people often address first, like guns and butter or whatever. He has a totally different approach. And to illustrate that point of a different approach, he said, think of antibiotics like this. When people start getting hurt, and there's a shortage of antibiotics and you can't simply go to the pharmacy and buy, you don't have to have guns, because people will bring you anything you want for a course of antibiotics. And he's talking slightly tongue-in-cheek, because if you don't have means of defending yourself, then people could just come and overpower you for your antibiotics. But still, there's a grain of truth in the little tale, you know. Very, very enlightening.
What's really interesting about what you just said, though, is, as you know, I was just recently in China, and it is overtly regulated and controlled from the top. People do not carry guns, and at any stage, I suppose, you could find yourself in a situation if you aren't to some degree compliant. Whereas here in South Africa, although we have more chaos, we do have a slightly larger sense of freedom due to the inept and useless nature of the government. And in many ways, I do appreciate that, which forces you and I to become more self-reliant and therefore more prepared, right?
Yeah. I think that South Africans have a huge advantage in that regard. I was recently chatting to some British people and asking them about their preparations, and they were a bit hesitant to talk about them for fear of the government finding out. And that was fine, but it was quite enlightening to me to hear how many people in Britain, I don't say it's a large percentage, but certainly they represented more than just themselves, are beginning to think along those lines. And I think if anybody wants to start prepping and they've got a limited budget, you have to have a vehicle of your own. And that's an expensive thing to have if you're
not
in
electric.
Transport.
Not electric.
Yes, non-electric, with spare fuel. And if you're a person who makes use of public transport and you don't have your vehicle, and you hear me say a limited budget and vehicle in the same sentence, you think, cheapers, how much money does this guy think I have? But the reality is that you have to have your own vehicle. Then you can start looking at cheap things, little items that you can prepare, pen knives and catapults and antibiotics. And, if you go into a pharmacy and you want to make a purchase of, let's say, $10, spend another $2 on Friar's balsam or calamine lotion or a cheap bandage or a couple of syringes and needles and that sort of thing. It's something that you can begin very, very cheaply in physical terms. In terms of things that you can hold in your hands. It's
Well, yes. So it's actual physical things and not apps and not digital things. So like the car, I think you told me that you've got an old Merc that's not too electronic.
Yeah, I've got a super duper S500. It was the last vehicle of South Africa's formerly richest man, and he's passed away now. So it's a fantastic thing. It was made in Germany. It's a custom thing, and it'll last forever. And I picked it up for a song. So, and I'll never sell it as long as I'm a prepper, which I will be for the rest of my life. And I've got a truck. I bought it second hand. The payments are not very expensive. It's a double cab Isuzu, 2.5 litre diesel, the famous KB 250D engine. And I've got a motorbike that, again, I picked up for a song. It's a KLR 650, a Kawasaki. It's a big bike. It can take 2-3 people on it, not comfortably, but it's an adventure bike. It's more of a road bike than an off-road bike, but it is known. It has a fearsome reputation for its off-road capabilities. And I have a horse for that very reason. In fact, my horse has just died, but I'll get another. Died
Oh,
of.
man, really?
We don't know what happened. Just keeled over. It wasn't down here. It was up in the mountains. So that's
How old was
sad.
it?
3 years old.
Oh, no, it was young.
I've got a saddle that I picked up for £20. Roughly
Hold
$20.
on. What horse was it? Was it a retired racehorse?
No, it was on this farm, there are about 70 riding horses. So horses come and go. It's a very big
A
farm.
bullpat.
Yeah. So I picked it up as part of a deal. A guy wanted some favors done by my chummy, my chum, and he said he'd pay him in 5 horses. Would you like 5 horses? I've got 5 young horses that are surplus to requirements. So my mate said to me, would you like to have one of them? That was about a year and some change ago. So I picked up a horse. If you're alert to these things, you will find opportunities as you go along. Mindset counts for a lot. If you can begin to recognize the things happening in the world, as I told you yesterday, one of my brothers, my youngest brother, phoned me on Saturday to ask me some advice. He's a very clever guy. Engineering clever, proper clever. Mathematics, science clever. And he said to me, listen, in the past I never wanted to hear a word from you about this stuff because I'm too highly strung. you would turn me into a nervous wreck with all of your stories of doom and gloom. But he said, right now, I can see what's happening in the world. It's unmistakable. Give me a rundown on what's cooking. So I gave him a rundown, and he was very, very impressed by it when I described to him who's doing what to whom, for what reason, and the calendar, the timeline that I've described to you in the past, this Judeo-Masonic timeline that demands that in the year of the green tree snake, in the Chinese zodiac calendar, when it overlaps with the year 2025, overlapping with the Jewish year 5785, which we've just gone into 5786, the Rosh Hashanah, which is strictly speaking not the real New Year, but it's celebrated as the New Year. It's the anniversary of Adam rather than the creation. When those three overlap, 5785, 2025, and there's a mnemonic that goes with the portion of the Bible of called Miketz, the end, that says in black and white, 2025. This is not the hocus pocus dreamy stuff. In that year, the extirpation of Gaza must take place, and blah, blah, blah. And then we go into the year of the horse. And that is, if anybody's ever wondered, the explanation to when Jacob says, let me tell you what will happen in the end times. Dan shall be as a viper by the side of the road, judging his brothers. He shall be as a viper that bites the heel of the horse. And they take that in the occult to refer to the year of the green tree snake, followed by the year of the horse, which will begin on the 16th of February next year. And so I told my brother all of this stuff, and I was able to make sense of what's going on in the world for him. Finally, he had a key to unlock the door of understanding all of these counterintuitive things that leave us scratching our heads. They're counterintuitive, but they're normal and natural if you are part of a pedophiliac, satanic death cult cabal. It's the most natural thing in the world. And so he's beginning his preparations. But as I say, Jeremy, the first thing is to recognize that there is something very, very wrong with the sanity of the world at the moment, whether it's represented by what's occurring in Gaza or NATO's involvement, egging Ukraine on. Why are they so desperate for this?
Now Taiwan. And the madness, the sheer rank insanity that prevails across the length and breadth of Europe, not to speak of the clownishness in the USA. These are not adult times. But once you can begin to think like that, prepping is daunting, but just remember that, like if you do those the BBC homepage always has these little things where you write in your salary, and then it tells you that you're in the top 0.1% of salary earners on the planet, or you write in your whatever your health or your weight, tell you that you among the fattest people alive. When you didn't think of it like that, you didn't think you were that fat, and you didn't think that you were that rich either. Likewise, if you imagine swimming in shark-infested waters and you see a fin, like in a Jaws movie, you don't have to be the fastest swimmer. You only have to be the second slowest. So every little bit of preparations that you make will help you in the survival competition, and that's what it is. It's a competition. It will be a competition. You've also got physical gold and silver hidden around the country.
Yeah. I had a lot more.
Where nobody else can find it, or very unlikely.
Yeah. I've got stashed in a few places. I had a lot more, and then I had to liquidate some for some tours that we did. But yeah, gold and silver, you know, people don't understand this. Mike Maloney and I want to say Dr. Chris Martinson have done work on this, and there is some fantastic work. All throughout of human history, going back to the first records, the purchasing power of gold was roughly $40,000 purchasing power today, an ounce. And silver's purchasing power was roughly 1/12 to 1/15. All throughout history until the advent of the old lady of Threadneedle Street, the Bank of England. And then it began to deteriorate, and then the Americans mucked around with it, and Roosevelt's Executive Order 6102, taking, you know, all of the gold from the citizenry of the country at $20 an ounce, and then promptly saying that gold is worth $32 an ounce. You know, they've mucked around with it and going off the gold standard temporarily, as Nixon said, on the Friday, the 13th of August, 1971. It was announced on Sunday, the 15th, but in fact, the final decision was taken, and the gears started working on the 13th of August. Have given a false value to gold, but it's rediscovering its true value rapidly before our eyes. And if you can't afford to buy gold, buy silver. Buy a little bit of silver and watch it shoot up in value as it is doing now. You just can't go wrong. All of human history tells us that, except for a very short span of time since the advent of fiat currency with the Bank of England.
And the Fed.
Yeah, beginning with the Bank of England, and then, as you say, the Fed doing the terrible things that it has done for the past 100 years since it was founded in 1913.
Do you think, Simon, that civil unrest, civil wars, are organic, or are they foreign-backed?
No, Jeremy, they're not. You know, the more you look at these things, the more you begin to see the hidden hand. Initially, as a normal person, or if you're one of the sheeple, which is fine, it's not going to do you any good. You're going to end up believing in things like the pandemic and the clot shots. But okay, you're normal and you think that whatever, Simon is hysterical and it's all conspiracy theory. But read your first book, then your second, then your third, then your fourth, then your fifth, and you'll rapidly realize that everything is inorganic. I said to my brother, there were ulterior motives to the Anglo-Boer War of 1899. But if you see it as primarily the theft of the largest gold lode in history, which was then given to a few Jewish families, you will understand it so much better. Likewise, the First World War, yes, there were other factors, but you will understand it very much better. You will comprehend the nuances and the mysteries, the things that you can't readily explain, if you see it as, first and foremost, the theft of Palestine. That's why Arthur Balfour wrote what's come to be known as the Balfour Declaration, but in fact it was just a short note to Lord Rothschild, saying, I think we're going to get this right, because it was that important that Palestine should be stolen from the Ottoman Empire. Likewise, the Second World War, if you see it as not only, but primarily an enormous kabuki theater exercise in creating a compelling justification that nobody could argue against for the giving of that Palestine that had been stolen from the Uthmans to the Jews, it will make so much more sense for you. Similarly, I don't know what the explanation is behind Vietnam and Korean wars, or Korean and Vietnam wars. But if you recognize that it's written in black and white, I have all of the sources, I'm surrounded by these sources, none of them being anything other than primary. The only sources I read are primary sources. It's not somebody telling me that Jeremy is a bad guy. It's Jeremy telling me with his own lips that he strangled the dog, that he kicked the cat, that he did whatever he did. If you recognize that it is doctrinal, that in the year of the green tree snake /5785/2025, and the subsequent year, in the year following the Star of Jacob, in other words, the Tutinchan Atlas comet of the 27th of September last year that stayed for 70 days, the comet foretold in the portion of the Bible that deals with Balaam and Balak, that if you understand that that is doctrinal, and that Damascus had to fall at the end of those 70 days, then you understand why the USA, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Jalani, and Israel invaded and conquered Damascus on the 5th of December. Otherwise, you're alienated from reality and truth. You can only make sense of things when you don't accept the narrative. If you listen to the conclave that was held, the final speech of the conclave that was held on the 10th of January 1952 in Budapest, Hungary, and you listen to that wiseacre, that sage, that ancient, deeply satanic man talk about how they will work gradually to, what is the right word, to take vengeance on the European peoples through a vaccination program that will run over years. When you hear him say this is what we're going to do, then you can make sense of the non-existent pandemic and the clot shots that are killing everybody as we speak. Yeah, I don't even know if I responded correctly to what you were saying, Jeremy.
Just to be clear, No. You made the point that I strangled both the cat and the dog, and I just want to clarify that it was only the cat that I strangled.
Dear
I'm not
me.
a cat person.
I've got bloody puff adders here like nobody's business.
And apparently black widows.
Yeah. Black widow spiders, puff adders, which are, just absolutely lethal, and lots of Cape cobras. So I've got to have
those too.
Yeah. So I've got to have cats.
Simon, you paint a very bleak picture, and it makes me wonder if being prepared even matters.
Jeremy, if you were one of the children massacred in Vietnam or in the South Sudan or wherever, life would be a hell of a lot bleaker. And I've come to realize that although we all look up, we all want to be Elon Musk, we all want a new car, we all want the next thing, the reality is that we have got it so damn good that we should look on the bright side and try our best. If we get caught up in terrible events like are happening in Gaza, then so be it. Then so be it. You're not going to be able to do much about it. But if you prepare, you don't have to be excellent. You don't have to be Elon Musk. If there are 100 people bathing I grew up just outside a town called Amanzimtoti, on the south coast of the province of Natal.
Yeah, KZN, yeah.
Yeah. It means sweet waters. King Shaka, I don't want to say christened because he was a heathen, but he named that river. And the local swimming beach is called Nyoni Rocks Beach, which means Bird Rocks Beach. And at the time that I was a lifeguard there, it still held the record for the most shark attacks of any beach in the world. Things have changed since because of the introduction of the anti-shark measures netting. But at that time, we knew that the chances of being attacked by a shark were apparently the highest in the world. But we wanted to be lifeguards. That was, for me, that was the best fun. It was, more enjoyable than soccer or rugby or cricket or tennis or hockey or whatever. It appealed to me. The waves, the sunshine, the beach, that was my cup of tea. I wanted to be a lifeguard, a voluntary lifeguard as a teenager, and then a professional lifeguard for a short while when I left school. And we also knew that it wasn't about being Mark Spitz. You didn't have to be the best swimmer in the world. You just had to be the second slowest if a shark fin was spotted. So if you've got your head screwed on properly, and you're looking at what's going on in the world, and you recognize the simple reality that things are really messed up, and you start taking a little bit of trouble to prepare, you will never be satisfied with your preparations. Never. I was walking outside yesterday thinking to myself, I need to get more tires for my bucky, a small truck. For those who don't know, we are crazy about trucks in South Africa, but we drive a size smaller than the Americans do.
And we call it a bucky.
And we call it a bucky, which means a small bin, something like a small bowl.
Sorry, just for the record, I said earlier boerpaard. I was referring to a horse, and I didn't clarify. That's, what is it in English? It's basically a farmer's horse, directly translated. I don't know. It's basically just a general horse.
Yes. And
an all-rounder.
I have a spare tire, a spare wheel, obviously, and then I have about 5, 6, 7, 8 spare tires. And I was thinking to myself, I need more. I've got 2 spare service kits. I've got spare oil. I've got, you name it. But I want more and more and more and more. And it really bothers me that I don't have enough preparations. But actually, I'm an idiot, because compared to the majority of other people, I'm much better off. You know, the thing to have done if you were, Russian, if your sympathies lay with Russia and you lived in the Donbass, let's say in Donetsk city, in 2014, the thing to have done, I interviewed a girl the other day. I say a girl, young woman, lovely, lovely lady. And she told me what it was like living through those years. And she kept referring to the fact that they had no water. And they ended up, you know, in those commie blocks in the old Soviet Union. They vary, but 5, 8 stories is most typical. They ended up drinking the water out of the radiator system of the block. They went into the basement. They set up a system. They drained that filthy water that had been in those radiator pipes for the previous 50 years. And they shared it out every day between the residents of that block, because nobody took any precautions when they could see that things weren't looking good regarding the basics like water. If you do make basic preparations like a water purifier, or if you put together, I don't like to work with my hands. I can't bear it. So I never make anything, you know. But I'll make sure that I've got the stuff for somebody else to do it. So I've got surgical kits here like you wouldn't believe. I'm not planning on stitching anybody. Likewise, I've got the components for a good water filtration system. Although, you know, somebody else would say, jeepers, you're the laziest guy in the world. I'd rather work, as I do, from 4 o'clock in the morning until 6 at night, 6 days a week, with my eyes and my brain. I love it. I get endless satisfaction doing it. I'd rather be the most industrious guy in the world in that regard than put a filtration system together with a 20-litre bucket. But I've got it because one day I will do it, if it's a necessity. Or one of my sons will do it. They're all handy people. Or one of my buddies will do it, and we'll have a water filtration system. And that takes you from solid failure to solid success. Because now in a time of lack, you're filtering water for another 300 people who in return are giving you an apple, a banana, an elastoplast bandage, you know, they're bringing water for you so you don't have to fetch your own. You're taking 10% of all the water you filter. It's not hard to be the second slowest swimmer. All you have to do is a little bit of swimming lessons, even if you hate them. Because the next guy, as we know, at the risk of bringing down the tone of the conversation, as a lifeguard and as somebody from Durban, and you as a South African, you know that people die by the score when the poor townships come down from the hills of Durban for Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and over Easter. Hundreds upon hundreds of people die. You're competing with people who couldn't be bothered to learn to swim. It's easy to win. If you've got a few cans of tuna, if every time you go to the shop, I did it again yesterday, I don't go to the shops very often, but I bought something that I really don't need, because in the time that lies ahead, it'll be of value. It only cost me 30 Rand, which is about $1.50 roughly. And in the time that lies ahead, it'll be worth the equivalent of $150. It'll increase in value at least 100 times.
My entire house has filtered water, from the showers to the kitchen to everywhere. I had it installed.
Yeah, yeah. We've got borehole water here, and it's a bit, you know, I speak so much Afrikaans nowadays that I'm forgetting English words. And the direct translation from Afrikaans is inaccurate. It's chalky, what the Afrikaners call chalky. Kalk.
Oh, yeah. So it's
Calcium.
a bit. Yes, it's a little.
Yeah.
It's a bit brown.
Yeah, mine is not brown. It's just got minuscule amounts of white calcium. So, for instance, over years you get accretions on the inside of your kettle, but that doesn't do you any harm. You know, in some places where it's severe, like Zanzibar Island, where I worked for a year, over the span of a lifetime, some people get very ill. You know, they get severe stomach problems from drinking calciferous water. But this water is living water because it's borehole water. no iodine, no chlorine, living. It's alive. It's fantastic.
No conversation about prepping is complete without firearms. Now, this is always contentious because there's always a comment, a reply along the lines of, but I live in a country where we aren't allowed to own guns. And yeah, that might be true, but sorry for you, but in our country we can. And so therefore, it's good to be armed.
Yeah, Jeremy, there's no country in the world where you can't own a gun. Every country in the world participates in the Olympics, and every country and every Olympics includes numerous shooting competitions. If you became a sports shooter, you'd be able to own multiple guns. Now, not everybody wants to become a sports shooter, but people are very quick to say, I can't, when in fact you can. And likewise, even in Great Britain, you can own firearms for vermin. One of my brothers doesn't live on a farm or anything like that, but he offers his services to farmers for vermin. So he has firearms, multiple. And again, you know, if you've got a firearm, it's the difference between, let's say, of 100 swimmers. You're not the worst. You're not the second worst. You're in the top 2 or 3 or 4. So if you're serious about prepping, you have to have firearms. If you're not that serious about it, if you listen to...
And lots of ammunition.
Lots of ammunition. If you listen to Jeremy Nell for his dulcet tones or other things that he discusses than prepping or catastrophe or crisis or whatever, and prepping is not really up your alley, okay, fine. Don't get a gun, but have a team. Expend some thought on where you would go and how you would get there. Have 20 liters of spare fuel. If your vehicle is getting roughly 10 kilometers to the liter, and you've got 20 liters of spare fuel that you never touch, that you're religious about just keeping one side, and don't believe what they say on the internet, the stuff lasts forever. For all practical intents and purposes, you don't have to fret for the next 5 years. It's not going to go off, as it were, in a year. That's absolute rubbish. And you don't have to put special tablets in the stuff either. If you've got you're getting 10 kilometers to the liter in your average motor vehicle, you've got 200 kilometers at least, assuming that your tank is not bone dry when you flee. You've got the 200 kilometers. That's all the way to I don't know, Kharkov from Donetsk city, if your sympathies are Ukrainian, or if, like me, you are absolutely convinced that the Russians are right about this war, and you're in Donetsk, and you've got small children, and you don't want them to be exposed to a war. 200 kilometers is practically Rostov-on-Don. You're completely out of the picture. You must have firearms. But if you're not likely to get firearms, there are so many simple, basic preparations that you can make that put you in simply a different league. You will never climb that mountain completely, because one day you find yourself thinking, well, I've got one bucky, but there's a saying in prepping, 1 is 0, 2 is 1, and only 3 is 2. So you should have 3 of everything. And I think like that about my vehicles. I want to get a new bucky now, or another double cab KB250 D-Tech Isuzu. It's the best non-expensive, it's the best non-Land Cruiser truck that you can buy. Simpler, more rudimentary than Toyota Hilux or Ford Ranger or some of the smart Chinese vehicles. But that's why farmers choose them. That's why every black farmer in the Eastern Cape, and I do mean every, drives only an Isuzu. And the white farmers who farm on easy land drive Isuzus for the most part. They are the best vehicle in the world as far as rudimentary reliability is concerned. I want to get another one. And I wish, by some stroke of luck, that my two older sons would each get an Isuzu. I'd have two, they'd have two. Then we'd have four. Then we would be set. But you know what would happen, Jeremy? The day after we get four, I'd be thinking, well, if we had five, then you will never climb the mountain. You will never get there. Prepping is a lifelong thing if you take it seriously. But you don't have to take it seriously to be one of the winners, to be in the top 0.1% of obese people in the world, or in the top 0.1% of salary earners in the world. It doesn't take much at all.
Isuzu is a great car. I'm quite a fan. But I mean, recently I drove through the Chinese desert in Toyota Land Cruisers, and well, they were incredible.
Best vehicle on the road, but hellish expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
that's why I said the best non-Land Cruiser
driving.
vehicle. Yeah?
Incredible driving, though. Yeah. But Isuzu is phenomenal. And I'm quite a fan of their MUXs, their SUVs.
No, I don't know them at all. I mean, I know of them, but I'm not familiar. You know,
3
never driven
liter,
in one.
3 liter turbo diesel, I think.
Yeah, let me give you another example just to open people's minds, man. If you are able to understand that what is happening in Venezuela is about the fact that the majority of U.S. oil, U.S. is the biggest driller in the world, right? We know. But U.S. oil is largely shale oil, and it's too light and sweet to make diesel with it. And if you consider that in a wartime, we sit on the biggest reserves of manganese in the world here in South Africa. And I used to live on one of the chief routes between the mines, the manganese mines, and the ports, or one of the ports. And manganese is used, it's kind of a stereotypical purpose. It has multiple purposes, but its stereotype purpose, as you might say, that the stereotypical purpose of gold is in electronics or wedding rings or whatever. The stereotypical purpose is hardening steel for military applications. And it's well known by everybody between where I live here, which is also on that route, between the mines and Port Elizabeth Harbour, that the manganese trucks are so busy at the moment. We are exporting so much manganese to Russia, China, the USA, that our roads are being wrecked, completely destroyed. Right. With that in mind, I'm trying to weave a little tapestry here. US shale oil, the whole world is gearing up for war, as we know, through manganese. Military vehicles tend to be diesel rather than petrol. And Venezuela has the world's largest reserves of oil, and it's very heavy. It's like tar. So it's difficult to process, but it's ideal for making dieseline. If you can do that, then you can make sense of something that you can never make sense of when you contemplate the fact that everybody knows that Colombia is the big source of drugs in South America, not Venezuela. And that those little skiffs that Donald Trump has been blowing up, killing those innocent fishermen are too damn small, and their fuel tanks are too damn small to make it anywhere near the USA. It's too damn small to carry meaningful amounts of cocaine, and the fuel tanks are too small to get to the USA. That has got nothing to do with it. It's all about tar oil.
As we come in for the final lap, I was going to say that one of the, I think, best prepping mindsets, particularly against Agenda 2030, New World Order, blah, 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 all the terms that mean the same thing, is actually to get out of the city. I mean, you live outside of the city. I kind of live in the countryside. These are good starts.
Yeah, that's the third thing that this guru guy, Jeko, talks about. I found some old notes. Jeremy, I'll bring this full circle. He talks about how the most important things that you can have are batteries, antibiotics, lighters, a radio, alcohol in a small flask, and a candle or lace saturated in fat.
What about power banks?
Yeah. So, and he gives a reason for, like you say, power bank batteries. But he described it in the context of moving out of the city. In other words, I'm endorsing your point. He endorses your point. He says most important thing is to have a team. Second most important thing is to have a place to go to. Third most important thing is that place should be yours. You must somehow be able to lay claim to it. And it should be out of the city.
Well, I think that's...
Sorry, Jeremy, but may I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
I beg your pardon. I just wanted to... A thought just struck me. About 20 years ago, I recall this only vaguely, about 20 years ago, BBC had an interview with, I think it was Nouriel Rubini or Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who are economists. It was one of the two of them, I'm almost sure of it. And he described how people die in cities when the electricity is cut off. Those that can't flee, the rate at which they die, without violence. He describes how even in the absence of violence, if just the electricity is cut off, how immediately you can't pump water to the tops of blocks of flats. You can't fuel vehicles to go to purchase food. Trucks that deliver food may get fuel from a remote location and then drive into the city and return. But if they can't do that, then there are no food deliveries. And I forget his punchline. I'm going to wing it a little bit here. I believe that what he said was that 90% of the population is guaranteed to die within 30 days if you only cut off the electricity of the population that remains. So those that can flee to a place where there's food and water and medicine and everything else that's compromised will do okay, but 90% will, I'm almost certain that it was 90% in 30 days, and that's quite an eye-opener. And on that note, I'll just throw in something else. I'm digressing a little bit here, but just as the thought comes to me, I'm a very much a picture person, and I was imagining people being in high-rises and not having water and not having food. And it occurred to me that, again, you put yourself in a different league if you go to a nursery and you buy a few packets of seed for zero money. Seed is cheap. I'm busy setting up an enormous vegetable garden. I'd never be able to consume the food, but I've got the Indian shopkeepers in town have all said that they'll take from me, and the Ethiopians, so that'll be good. But I bought seed. Man, it's like 30 Rand, $1.50 a pack of a couple of hundred seeds. You know, it varies. If you've got 10 packets of seed, $15 worth of seed, with US inflation being the way it is now, and the loss of purchasing power of the dollar, let's call it $30. Let's say you get half for your buck what I get for my buck at the official exchange rate. For $30, it's not money. You will be able to plant an infinite amount of food. Admittedly, you won't be able to eat it in the first day. It's going to take 3 or 4 months, and you've got to be able to water it. But start. Later on, you can worry about filtered water or water from the radiator of your high-rise apartment. In my mind, I had this vision of an old lady caught in such a catastrophe where the electricity has been cut off, and she's got window boxes of veggies. So when for the first 3 days or whatever you're trying to figure out things, other people are in this much trouble, she's only in that much trouble. If you make basic effort to prepare, you will put yourself into a different class. You will become the second slowest swimmer, which is all you have to be in the competition of life. Charlie Munger gave a speech at the beginning of last year, if I'm not mistaken, in which he talked about how people understand life falsely. He described how much better people's lives are now than 100 years ago, which is only 4 generations. He spoke about longevity. He spoke about deaths in labor of women, infant mortality, wealth, comfort. He sketched how good our lives are. And he said, but we're seeing higher degrees of unhappiness than we've ever seen before. And he then made the argument that it's down to only one thing, namely that life is a competition. And what we're seeing now is people who are winning in such a spectacular way that it makes us feel like losers. Whereas in fact, relative to our great-grandparents, we are doing fantastically well, and we should be elated. Every day should be a song for us, if you make a fair comparison. So back to this analogy of the shark attack and the swimmers at the beach. You only have to be the second slowest swimmer. But if you want to be the third slowest, or the fourth, or the fifth, or the sixth, the amount of effort that you have to put in to elevate yourself is not very considerable at all. It's only when you want to get into the 10% cohort that it's, and you're thinking of maybe I should have a getaway helicopter, that it becomes very, very, very difficult. But to be in the top half or the top third or the top quarter is, numbers-wise, is very, very easy. Takes minimal effort. Some seeds, some bandages, some spare fuel, bow and arrow, some nice knives, some stuff that you can trade, some silver, some old socks in a trunk. Put yourself a trunk together, just one trunk, what we call in South Africa a trommel from the army. But I'm talking about a standard, thin, mild steel trunk, a foot locker or a locker, call it what you will, depending on where you live, of, I suppose, those things' capacity is somewhere between 100 and 250 litres about, put a few odds and sods in there, and prepare to be able to throw it in the back of your motor vehicle. Life is a competition. It's a competition just the way that Charlie Munger said. Everybody nowadays thinks that they're losing when in fact they are winning overwhelmingly. If you put something like that together, you as a viewer, not you as Jeremy Nell, you cannot lose.
Simon, my voice is shot. Quickly, give me your website.
Suidlanders.org. I'm a full-time employee of the famous Suidlanders prepper survivalist organization, the largest of its sort in the world. If anybody would like to make a donation, we would be very, very grateful for it. Jeremy, thank you for having Suidlanders on your show again. It's always lovely to talk to you.
Simon Roche, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
My pleasure, our pleasure, Suidlanders' pleasure. Cheerio, Jeremy.